5,000 live viewers? What?
You're welcome.
Oh, that was really trippy. I didn't realize I hadn't unmuted, the Zoom. Sorry, I'm like brain dead. That I hadn't muted the Facebook Live, and so I came back and I put my headphones in, and you were saying stuff, and I was like, "Is he talking to me?" And then I looked at the Zoom, and your lips weren't moving. I was like, "What is going on?"
Yeah, I did the same thing to myself because I normally keep Facebook muted. I unmuted it the other day because I was watching a video on it, and then all of a sudden I just felt like heard myself talking to myself, and it's like, oh, that's a bit weird.
Oh, have I ever told you this? This is a funny story. So I have this Market Hero t-shirt, right? And to those of you that remember Market Hero was one of Alex Becker's attempts to create and launch a SaaS software. I think it actually did pretty well. Anyway, I signed up for it and I paid for it, and I think it was $180 or something, and I never used the software because I couldn't figure out this like one bug that happened like right as I tried to connect it, and their support just like refused to help me, and so I wear this t-shirt as my $180 t-shirt because I obviously canceled and I never got a refund, so I paid $180 for this t-shirt, so I wear it. It's actually a good quality t-shirt. I'm not sure if it's worth $180, but hey.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wearing my my Holly T-shirt right now,
Hey.
which is honestly one of my favorite shirts. Like whatever material she used is amazing.
I remember those. That was a good time. Is that from Chicago still?
Yep.
Wow, that is old school. I love it. Man, do you share into a couple of groups here?
Yep, I shared it. Hopefully, it's not messed up like it was last week. I mean, if I was gonna say if anybody can't see this, then let me know. But if they can't see it, they can't. That's not really gonna work, is it?
Well, I'm gonna keep an eye on the comments here real quick just to see whether anyone's complaining that it's not accessible. But I mean, to me, it's not shared privately in the groups, so all good. Okay, it's always so strange for me to sort of get on board with the delay. It's a very strange feeling.
Yeah, it takes a bit to get used to, but the most annoying part is just when you're actually trying to have a conversation with someone.
Right. We've got a couple of people watching right now. Is the video and audio coming through okay to the few people that are watching right now live? Feel free to pop into the comments and let us know. We're going to start here any second now. Today's subject is keeping clients happy, getting results, and staying profitable. Are all three together possible? And we're just going to kind of do what we do, which is to kind of share anecdotes and kind of our experiences from the last few years of doing this beautiful thing that we do, and just kind of share a couple of stories, I guess. Man, this delay, it's so long. I wonder if that's dependent on the streaming platform as well. Like if different, like, because I know that Facebook has a delay.
Yeah.
Even if you go live on Facebook, there's a little bit of a delay. But I wonder if different streaming platforms, like restreaming platforms, like are quicker.
Yeah, we'd have to play around with that, and just for the next 50 episodes, we'll just use a different software each time until we find the one that works.
So you mean until we build our own?
Yeah, until we get so annoyed that nothing does what we want it to do that we're just like, fuck it, we'll do it ourselves.
Exactly. Right. Shall we dive in? I think we've given people enough time.
Yeah.
This is episode 5. And it's all about keeping clients happy versus getting results versus staying profitable. Is it all possible together? And this is not a lecture. This is not a what do you say? A pitch. We have nothing to sell apart from our JV Zoo product that we're going to launch at the end. No, the whole point of this has really just been for us to bridge the gap across the pandemic of not getting to hang out with people and to talk shop, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what else can you do when you're stuck inside literally all day, every day?
The same that we've been doing for the last 5 years, doing the same thing.
I mean, to be fair.
Oh man. Well, hey, how do you want to do this? Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'll just jump right into it. And I kind of alluded to this while you were making your drink, but something that I said, which was a big lesson for me to learn over time, was that I was, and it makes perfectly logical sense that if somebody hires you to perform a marketing service, and the goal of that service is to generate an ROI, so they get more money out than they're putting in, then they would be happy. But what I learned is that in my experience, getting someone results in terms of the traditional sense of getting them an ROI, whether that's, for every dollar they spend, they get $5 back, or even for every dollar they spend, they get $20 back, isn't necessarily going to make them or keep them happy. And there have been plenty of instances where we have gotten what I would consider pretty good results for clients in terms of ROI, very provable and definitive results, where we've still lost accounts or still had very upset clients for things very differently. And that's what really matters, because, if they're not happy, you're not going to retain them regardless of what your results are. And that took me a while to understand. So there is a difference, which is why this is called this. There is a difference between keeping clients happy and actually generating results from them. And I think we somehow just lost John. Let me see if we can get him back real quick. Just go ahead and open this up. Copy URL. We'll see what's going on with him while he is sorting his stuff out, but I'll just carry on. Let me just double check to make sure that the stream has not ended, because he was hosting it, and that could be a problem. Just according to that, it is still live, and it is still showing me just sitting here all by my lonesome. I will... All right, so I will continue on, and if John can join back whenever he's available, then we will go from there. So getting results versus having someone actually be happy are not one and the same. And that was a lesson that took me a while to learn. And the reason being is that we're dealing with people. Yes, businesses hire us, but at the end of the day, it is people who are hiring us. It's people who are paying our invoice. It is people who are reading our reports. It's all about the people, even though it is the business that hired us. And people are emotional, not analytical. So when it comes to retaining people, keep them happy, getting results, etc., it's about 65% or so keeping someone happy, and I would say only about 35% of actually generating results. And I'm saying that from experience of having my own clients and working inside of other agencies and talking with other agency owners about instances where results either weren't there or weren't the greatest, but clients were happy and they stayed on for a really long time, and other times where results were there, results were great, but clients weren't happy and they just decided to bounce very early on. And it's so way, way, way more important to make sure people are happy. And yes, you do need to generate results, but that's more so kind of on the back end of things. And let me just see what happened to John real quick. Still gone. I'll continue to carry on by myself. That is fine. We will get all of this sorted, and hopefully he'll be back in a minute. Just toss him a quick message. what's going on right there. Okay, so I'm talking to him. He'll join eventually. So getting into some specific pain points of when this has been very apparent, when I've personally run into issues of just losing clients, even though the results were there because they weren't happy, to make it very clear just that this is real, not just like talking on my ass or anything. So something that I talked about in, I believe it was the second episode that we did, between John and I, which you can find either on my Facebook, it's also on my YouTube, etc. We want to check it out. But basically, I had a client who was in a white label relationship with them. And this was a package deal. So it was two clients. They came in at the same time, $5,000 a month total. They got amazing results. They had been in business for a long time. They just basically needed an SEO to go in there. I don't think they'd ever done SEO before. And so their website was just in a really great place for growth because they had just done everything naturally, no spam, no issues. And they were well known within their community. So they very quickly saw really great results. So $5,000 in, and about $75,000 worth of leads coming out. They were in a high ticket niche. And so I was very happy. I was like, man, these are going to be clients that are going to be with me for a very long time. This white label partner who brought me these clients, they're going to give me a ton more of their clients because this is, very quickly, we just saw amazing results. Super, super happy. Well, even though we achieved that results, I think about 4 or 5 months in is when we hit that kind of peak. They still canceled after 6 months. And the reason being is that the client wasn't happy. Now, the reason the client happy, there was a disconnect, and we talked about that in the second episode, between what the white label partner was setting the expectation for with the client versus what the expectation was being set with me to them. But the issue was that they were not happy because they cared about the vanity of ranking for a very specific keyword. And because even though they were getting all these results, all these ROIs, because it was the vanity that made them happy, they still left. Now, there is something to be said. Oh man, that's unfortunate. John's having trouble getting in here. Man, well, hopefully he can get in here soon. But yes, there is something to be said between getting results is more important than the vanity of ranking somewhere. We all know anybody who's been in SEO for a while is aware that actually generating results in the ROI is much more important than where you're ranking Google, because who really cares? What matters is what you're getting out of it. It doesn't matter if that one particular keyword is doing really well or doing really poorly, if all these other ones are doing fine. But there is something still to be said that if this is what this person values, you need to focus your conversation there, even if it's reframing, or at least trying to reframe what their opinion is, what they think that they need to do. So that was an instance where they left even though we were getting results and they weren't happy. Another instance was I was working with an InfoSec company, or a information security company, for their Google ads, and their budget was basically unlimited. They said, hey, we're willing to spend whatever on Google ads as long as we're getting at least $2 back for every dollar that we put in. So ROI, quote unquote, seemed very important to them. However, once we started working together, they were not happy because, in their belief, somebody who they hired should basically execute the automated reports that Google sends out. So Google gives you suggestions like, hey, you should make these changes to your account. And they were not happy because they felt as though that if Google suggests these changes, then they need to be made. They also were not happy because, again, vanity, they were not happy that quickly after starting working together, the amount of clicks they were getting dropped significantly. Now, that should have happened because they were spending a lot of money on terms that were getting them clicks, but weren't actually generating them sales. And so because of that, we worked on the reframing and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it didn't work out because I didn't see that ahead of time to come out in front of it. And I was only able to address that issue after the fact, after they had decided, hey, here's this issue. And then the situation goes from, hey, let me get ahead of this and talk to you about the potential issue that you're going to come across, versus, okay, now this issue appears, because then it just looks like you're trying to cover your own ass when the issue has already presented itself and then you're talking about it. So you do need to get ahead of these things as well. And John's supposed to talk here. Let me just check in on him real quick. me just check to see if there's any comments as well before I continue. Jonathan said his internet is down, which is very unfortunate, but let me just see real quick. I'm just going to see before I continue if he wants me to continue or if we just should schedule this for a different time, because of course you're only going to be hearing from me, and who wants to just hear from me? It's quite unfortunate, but I shall continue until I hear back from him. So kind of backtracking there for a second, getting back on track to the actual show. So again, so where we are right now is there's a difference between happiness, getting results. Just because you get somebody results doesn't mean that they're going to be happy. And just because they're happy, you still have to get them results. I don't want to make this seem like, hey, you don't have to get results, you just have to make somebody happy. But retaining someone is very important to actually making sure that they're happy. So what does that actually look like? What does it look like to make a client happy, or some of the things that you can do that at least I have done to make the client happier with the fact that they've hired you, happier with the fact that they're working with you, regardless of how it impacts the results. So this is more talking about, customer service, user experience, or customer experience, and all those sorts of things. So one is client that they were very interested in the vanity of ranking for terms that sounded good. So, hey, here's this term that I just made up that is relevant to my industry. So for example, let's say it was a car accident lawyer, and they're like, man, when I Googled, car accidents due to dirty windshield, I didn't see myself ranking for this, even though nobody searches for that. So this client had lists of, maybe like 5 to 10 zero search volume keywords that they wanted to rank for. And so what we did was we went into their site, made some changes to the content, ended up being able to rank for those keywords, even though it makes no difference. It was, at the end of the day, waste of time, waste of budget in terms of what we were doing for them versus actually being able to generate results. But it took the situation from an email being sent that, hey, we're not happy because, when we Google this, we don't see ourselves here, to them quite literally being like, hey, man, you're like a god of SEO. Like we asked you to do something, and then it just magically went up within like a week because there was no competition. So it wasn't that difficult to do. Now with that, mentioned vanity a couple times. Oh, and Jonathan is actually back.
Yo.
You made it back.
That's really interesting. My internet was gone. Is it still live streaming?
We are still live streaming. I've just been carrying on as a solo band.
Well, in that case, I'm gonna get another rum and coke and watch some TV.
I mean,
that's
by
awesome.
all means. Yeah, we'll yeah, so so basically I went through the kind of talking about some failures, and I was talking about some links gone through to make a client happy, but I can finish up on this point I was just talking about, and then if we want to circle back where you can talk about some of the failures that you've had on making people happy, and then we can kind of just basically get back on track.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So finishing up what I was just talking about is, that situation went from a client being not happy whatsoever, and even though we made some changes that in terms of results were redundant, they were then really happy about that. Now, of course, what we want to do is we want to set expectations like, hey, rankings aren't everything, these keywords don't have any search volume, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, we did make that point, but we still addressed their issue. We still addressed their problems. We were able to solve that while also trying to reframe the expectation. The reason being is that there's something called, I believe it's called cognitive dissonance. I might be using that phrase wrong, but it's basically when somebody has an idea in their head of how something works or their opinion on something is, it's very difficult to actually change their mind. And when you show them evidence that they're wrong or that their opinion isn't correct, all it does is it reinforces what they already believe, which is really, really strange. So if you're like, for example, let's say someone believes that the earth is flat. And so you're like, hey, here's empirical evidence that contradicts that. Instead of people going, oh, my bad, I was wrong, let me adjust how I think about this. What most people go is, no, that's, it just reinforces their idea. And no, it doesn't change their opinion whatsoever. So even if a client has situations like I just talked about where they value vanity and rankings, more often than not, you're not going to be able to just reframe their thinking just through a simple email. It can take a very long time to do. So you still need to address those problems. That's basically what we did there, is trying to reframe it, because we understood that from experience of just saying, hey, you know, rankings don't matter in the capacity that you think they do. This is how it really works. All it does is just they continue to be unhappy. So that was my first point of that. And if we want to kind of go back to some of the failures that you've had, Jonathan, on, you know, trying to make people happy in times where, you know, that maybe you lost the client for it, or maybe it just negatively impacted the relationship that you had with that client just because they weren't happy.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's such a bizarre thing, and I'm sure you've already covered a lot of this, even just with the little snippet that I caught, since apparently my internet wanted to crap itself. Framing the deal and seeing how educated on your like project matter the client is everything. And what's funny about it too is that sometimes it blindsides you when like you're dealing with someone that is an immediate decision maker who has buying power, but then obviously because it's a bigger business, they have like a CEO or something above them that isn't as educated, but that still has like the final say. And we were massively blindsided by that once, and it's kind of an interesting story. So imagine this. I'll try and paint you a word picture. So these guys come to us. They are marketers, but they are now working in-house for a major, let's call them a medical company on the West Coast. They also had side projects, and for those side projects, they had used SEO Butler. Because of that, they had incredible trust, and they came to us with one of their with one of the sites that they were working for in their day job. And that was like a medical facility that people went to get certain treatments and stuff like that. We started the SEO. We did one proposal call, very educated, super nice guys, amazing dudes. We sold them on like, I don't know, it was like a $3,000 retainer. They're on the call. They're like, yup, when can you start? Happy days. So that starts just like taking off. So we get introduced to the second guy who is also working at the company, who's good friends with the first guy. And again, great conversation, super educated guy, really in the know about marketing. We start working, but instead of working on one site, he adds another 2 sites. So now we have 3 sites from the same business that we're working on, all in the medical field, doing slightly different things. These guys own like what do you say? They own a huge part of that industry in that particular area where they are. So now at this point, we're doing like, a solid $10,000 a month or something with them. We're putting out all the stops. We're trying to do all the work that we possibly can, yada, yada, yada. Now, fast forward about 3 or 4 months later, I want to say, everyone's super happy with the work that we're doing. We're communicating very actively. I'm doing a lot of late evening calls because on the West Coast. That first website that we took on is just mooning, as they would say in crypto. It's just taking off. It's seeing height after height. The other 2 sites are slowly but steadily getting there. Now, all of a sudden, the 2 sites that were added on later shit themselves, right? There's a content the content algo update at some point last year, and these guys had probably 2 or 3 years worth of weekly blogs on their website that were talking about medical stuff with no authority, right? So these were just like accounts of all these medical things, including drug abuse and stuff like that. And so the problem was that all of a sudden they lost a bunch of traffic. So we're like, right? Now, to the point of how far would you go to like make a client happy? I book a flight, London to LA, head out to the West Coast, meet with these guys, do a battle plan. I tour all of the facilities. Great people, by the way. And we put in all of this work, and then within probably another 6 weeks of that moment, one of the two penalized sites starts coming back because of the work that we're doing. So now we've got 2 out of 3 sites just crushing it. And they're really happy. The 2 guys we're working with, great guys. One of them books a call and he says, look, we're looking to expand. I want to have a call with you, see how else you can help us, all these other projects we can do. Let's plan a call for like in 3 days from now, right? So I'm like, yeah, this is going to become a, from a 10 to a 20K retainer now. Jump on that phone call. He says, John, look, man, love you, dude. Hope we stay in touch. But our CEO Googled a couple of like terms on his phone. And basically, this is it. Thanks. And we're like, from a call where you're going to go in and with the expectation of getting more business, it suddenly becomes something really sad. But the problem that I identified from that and that I really learned from was that one of the very important questions that everybody should ask when they're priming a deal, or even once they've started working with someone, is who are the key stakeholders that are looking at these reports, that are looking at the spend, that are looking at who are the key decision makers that are involved directly or indirectly in this SEO campaign, digital marketing campaign, whatever it is that you do. And then secondly, how do they measure the success of this campaign? Because ultimately, the person that you're directly dealing with might be super clued up on SEO, but if that CEO doesn't get it, you're screwed, man. It can happen to all of us. They just call up and like, oh, why are we not number 1 on Google for Google? I don't. And so that became a huge learning moment for me to start understanding, playing to the different KPIs, I guess, that different people are measuring the success by. The added bonus by asking that question that I've started to see is that you're actually able to also make your contact, if you're dealing with a bigger organization, is that you're able to make your contact a hero. Because if your contact, the person that's keeping you on retainer, has certain KPIs by which they are being measured, then if you can help them achieve those, then everything just works much, much smoother. But yeah, that's probably my worst story of where it really backfired, where we went the extra mile, literally about, I don't know, 3,000 of them or whatever, to make something happen, and it just absolutely not work. There's been a ton of small ones where we from an agency point of view, or on SEO Butler, where we've done extra, but we didn't ask the right questions and stuff like that, and so it kind of backfired there. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Have you ever had something like that happen where you've gone the extra mile and that didn't pay off at all?
So I would say that we had a situation, I mean, we're still working with the client, but we did have a situation where we went out to their location because they wanted to have discussions around implementing certain things that we don't do. But I was like, yeah, sure. I'll do some research and I'll come with this kind of plan and we'll work through it together, because this isn't kind of your wheelhouse, but I understand enough of it and I can kind of lead this initiative for you. Flew down to the offices and I was like, awesome. We've been working on pretty much the same budget for almost 2 years. Their budget is lower than it really should be for the market. We're going to propose this thing for them. They said they're really interested in this. We've been kind of debating on it for a year, where they've mentioned it a couple of times, but now they're like, hey, we want to get really serious about it. And I was like, man, this is probably going to be at least $5,000 to $10,000 project that they know that we're not going to handle. So we're going to be able to, connect them with a partner. We'll probably be able to get like some sort of commission off of that, which would be nice. But also because we're going to meet them, we'll be able to do all this, sort of networking stuff, and we'll be able to raise their budget, and we'll be able to talk about, here's all this other stuff that we could be doing, get a lot more aggressive. And so went down there, I spent a week down there. I think I only spent about 3 days with them. And the rest I was just messing around locally. But, we had all these good plans, get into those meetings, talking about, that other stuff that they want to do, all the time and effort that I prepared. Like, here are the companies that you should talk to. I vetted all of them, and, they just weren't really interested. It became this like super awkward experience where, in one of the calls, like the owner of the company just like walked down. He's just like, just finish the call, because there was just like a massive disconnect. It just turned into like, okay, great, I guess we're not moving forward. There were a couple companies that I recommended that I wanted to have a really good relationship with going forward. I'm like, man, now their first impression of me is like going through this really painful process with them. So I wasn't very happy about that. And kind of ultimately it just turned out where nothing changed. It was kind of like a really big waste of time almost, where like budget is the same, not really changing that. So that's been probably the one where I spent the most time and effort that just nothing kind of came out of it. I mean, I tend to be I don't deal with a lot of BS just because we limit how many clients we work with. And so, if someone's being a pain, I'm just like, okay, well, bye. We're almost at capacity anyway. So I really don't put up with a lot of BS. So when people do have like crazy things that they're like, oh man, it's just not worth it to me, I just can't be bothered with it. So, I mean, that would be the one that I've put in the most time where like, what was the point of that?
That's the one that stings. I get it. Yeah. No, man, I get it, because like I think it also is really a reflection on the kind of personalities that you and I are, particularly because we're not the kind of people that are likely to ever want there to be doubt on that we've done everything that we could to deliver a great product or a great service. And so, sometimes that's gonna not work out, and then it really sucks because you've overextended and you've like over delivered and stuff like that. So I totally get that, man. That blows.
I mean, so what are some of the things that you've done to essentially, over deliver, kind of like those out of scope things, or the extra things that you've done to kind of help make people happier, even if it didn't make any sort of difference to the end result that they got in terms of an ROI that actually worked out and were actually worth your time?
That's a great question. Let me have a think. So I think some of the things that worked out really well where we did go the extra mile are a lot of introductions, right? So that for sure, a lot of intros where, especially on a web design, web dev front, I introduce people all the time, and I spend a ridiculous amount of time bridging the conversation between trying to translate what the client wants and what the dev or designer like needs to hear to understand that, because a lot of the time people really struggle to clients really struggle to translate that. And so I have spent ridiculous amounts of time without making any money on it, just in that in between, because I understand in the long term that if the client has a better website, then they're going to convert higher, and then obviously that's also going to positively reflect on me. A lot of education as well. So we deal with clients in all kinds of different niches, but luckily for us now we deal mostly with e-com, e-learning, and SaaS, and so most of our clients are really tech aware. But we also deal with like B2B services businesses, and those are usually run by stakeholders that are not so tech aware. And so, man, the hours I've put into actually explaining how some of this stuff works, that's always paid off, or almost always paid off. Sometimes it just backfires because you almost over explain, and then they start thinking that, like, this is going to sound really rude, but that they have a valid opinion on the like, on the subject matter, especially when it comes to stuff like link building. That's really dangerous, because they start thinking that they might know better than you and that kind of stuff. What's worked really well, so like I said, the web dev, web design stuff, recommendations, that kind of stuff, over delivering as far as content is always really good. It makes people feel really satisfied, and it's very quantifiable. So a good example there is we'll often get clients that have very thin content on a lot of pages, like product pages and stuff like that. And what we'll scope it up, and it'll be like, I don't know, let's say 5,000 words to get it all done. And they only have like a 3,000 word budget. Then, we'll just throw in the extra 2,000 words in the retainer just so that they can get it done in that month. And then they feel like, oh man, look at how much we've achieved, and that's definitely a big win. And it's not a huge expense either.
So when you come into those situations, so what I often do, and I don't know how to frame, which is why I'm explaining what we do to see if it makes sense to you, is that if we're in a situation where we're like, man, we can spend, let's say, $1,000 in expenses on this client's account, but because they need this extra thing, it's going to cost us, $1,200. So whatever, we'll just do the extra, $200 of work. And then what we tend to do, especially in cases like this, is we'll just kind of make it up on the back end, where it's like, okay, maybe the month after that, we'll only do $900 for the next 2 months to make up for that. You don't do that, or you do that?
So sort of. I mean, like, I think that where you're more of a spreadsheet wizard, I think you probably track the expenses of your campaigns a lot more accurately than I probably ever will, which is probably to my detriment. But we will, if we've just spent 3 months of absolutely, every month we're going above the content budget by however many thousand words or whatever, then I won't feel bad if, in December, where there's nothing going on in that particular industry, if we then just do like 1,000 words, we just throw up 2 blog posts or something, you know what I mean? So yeah and no, it really depends. One other thing that I just thought of that always works out really well is, for the majority of clients that we work for, we're either contracted to do either Facebook or SEO. And for some clients now, there is an overlap, of course. But even for just the other week, I spent an hour consulting actually a client that we're partnered on some Facebook stuff when we're only employed to do the SEO, with no intention of getting hired. If they do hire us for Facebook stuff, that'd be great. But the actual idea that I always have is, if we can afford to add value somewhere, then surely that's going to get us closer to the goal of upgrading the contract, keeping them on for longer, whatever it might be, right?
Right. No, that makes 100% of sense. Yeah, where I get really kind of like anal about it, if you will, because like I don't know, like I had to spend some extra time like answering an email or like a phone call or like consulting on this. Like I don't really care, but where I do track it fairly meticulously is when it's that stuff that is just, like we had to do more work on what we we're already planning to do without expecting. Like, for example, we had a client where we didn't realize just how bad the internal linking on their site was. Like, they had pages that like there was like almost no internal linking existing on their entire site. The internal links that they did have were like pointed to pages that they shouldn't have because the anchor text just wasn't contextual at all. And they had a bug with their website that when we crawled it with like Screaming Frog, we only found about half of the actual size of the website initially. So what was supposed to take like maybe 7 to 10 hours ended up taking like 2 weeks to do. So for something like that was like, and that was like 2 months into working with these guys too. So it was like, man, like that was like, basically we did like 2 months, maybe 2.5 months worth of work in that 1 month to be able to get everything done. So it was like, for now the next kind of like couple months going forward, we're basically taking a portion out of it to like basically supplement that, because over enough time that can really kind of just like bite you in the ass when it's like, oh man, we're actually looking at, okay, great, a couple of those instances pop up over a 12-month span. You were expecting to have, let's say, a 40% profit margin, but you only have like a 25% profit margin or something like that. So that's where I tend to be just a little bit anal. But like you said, like I also track all of that. So I'm very in tune with where the money's going.
Yeah. Man, I can hardly keep track of my like slippers at home, so I don't know how you do it. So we've kind of established the baseline of where it's worked out, where it's not worked out, and kind of the lengths to which we go to make that happen. But I think one of the things that would be really interesting to consider is, why do you think it is, or like in marketing in general, like why do you think, what are some of the main pitfalls of why clients become unsatisfied or unhappy?
So the root of it all goes down to communication and expectations, which are tied together. You set your expectations by communication. But I think one of the most common reasons, or at least the most common reason that I come across that somebody isn't happy, is something to do with a vanity metric. And this is because the people that we're dealing with, in our case, like, it's typically not the marketing person. We're typically dealing with the CEO, or we're dealing with people that even when they have the marketing person, they're still in such a way that the CEO is still very intertwined with everything, where they're still kind of like the direct point of contact. The marketing person is like the other person that you like CC in case someone isn't available, sort of situation. So because they don't have that level of education, when it comes to, and not to say that they aren't smart, they're just ignorant on the sophistication of the marketing channels, is that it's like, oh, this is why I Googled this, my own thing. Or, oh, I noticed that our bounce rate went down by 10% last month. I guess that means the SEO isn't doing what it should be doing, or the traffic you're sending isn't good. It's because they just don't know how to necessarily evaluate these sorts of things. That's the number one thing where I feel that I'll just get emails about like, hey, why is this like that? Or what do you mean? Why is this down, or whatever? It's just some random kind of vanity metric, or just a metric in general that doesn't necessarily mean that anything's going right or wrong. But that's like the number one thing. That's the kind of the unexpected thing. And that's one of the things that I think you were here at the time that I was talking about when it comes to cognitive dissonance, is where if you believe that this matters, it doesn't matter how much I tell you that it doesn't matter and how much proof I show you that it doesn't matter. That's not what's going to change your mind. And that I would say is our number one headache when it comes to clients just randomly being unhappy about something, is those situations.
For sure. I think that you could almost go a level above that and say that that sort of cognitive dissonance is also influencing people who don't like particular ways of marketing, right? So like a CEO that has been burned by SEOs, and like that there's no CEO out there that hasn't been burned by SEOs, right? Like that's just the reality, because the reality is we operate in like scum infested waters. Like the fact is, a lot of SEOs suck, and a lot of SEOs will rip people off. That we had that whole conversation in the white label versus partnering, right? Where people are buying a $300 SEO package off of some service website and are then retailing it for $2,000 or $3,000 and are passing it off, and then the client doesn't get any results, and then they're pissed. If the cognitive dissonance, if that particular person comes in with the mentality that SEO doesn't work, or Facebook ads are never ROI positive, it's a ripoff, PPC doesn't work, right? You can get all the results you want. They will find a way to reason why that result wasn't associated with you, right? So they're like, well, yeah, of course there's more leads right now. It's because, there was a story in the New Yorker about how our ice cream shop, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things. I think the other thing that's interesting about what you said is the education level. And I think that's such a tough thing to hit on, because we always, in our business, we always have the struggle of trying to figure out how much do you actually educate the customer, because I think there's a really fine line, right? Like, you want to educate them enough to where they can interpret your reports and they can understand that you're doing good work, but you don't want to educate them so much that they start going off and reading Ahrefs blogs and thinking that they now know SEO.
Right. Yeah, it can certainly be a fine line, and that's something that we've put in a lot of time and effort into creating almost training materials for clients. And when it comes to like what we're doing on the SEO side of things, like when we're creating strategies, we'll send out, and some of them are outdated, so they've been removed. I just need to actually update them. But we'll send out like, okay, great. Here's the keyword research that we did. Here's how we did. Here's why it's important. Here's what this means to you. Here's, of this report, like this is what this means. You probably see this, but that doesn't mean what you probably think it does, so on and so forth. When we get a new client and we send them their first report, I create like a 5-minute Loom video, and I'm just like, okay, here's what this means. Here's what that means. Google Ads clients, when we actually launch a campaign, we send a 5-day email series talking about like, here's what you can expect. It's called like the What to Expect series. And it's just like, ads are now live. Here's what you're probably going to see in the first 3 weeks, because basically they don't perform as well at the start. So we kind of like to set the expectations beforehand, but also like, here's how to scale your account and just all this other stuff. And that's been really important. That's something we're always trying to evolve, is that kind of education level where they understand it more so than probably the layperson, but not trying to take a client and try to turn them into like an SEO expert, because one, they don't have the time, two, they also don't have the interest. So it's a mix between like, how can we quickly explain and have them understand this highly technical concept without over explaining it, but also without over simplifying it either.
Sure. I really like that. I really like having that welcome sequence. I think that makes a lot of sense. Another thing that you said there very briefly is making quick Loom videos. I think that one of the problems with especially the SEO community is that they're so afraid to pick up the phone or make a video. And what I find is that the older generation, the white dudes with gray hairs, which, let's be honest, that's, in the Western world, at least, that's still the majority of people that are running successful big businesses. And it's something that's changing now, luckily. But the reality is that they run those businesses, and they're not the guys that are keen on getting 3 spreadsheets and 2 emails and a text. They want that phone call, and they will respect you so much more for having the balls to give them a call or send them a Loom video where they can see your face and they've got that interaction than anything. And I really found that a lot of the time, just jumping on a 5 to 10 minute phone call with some of these people gets you so much further than all of the emailing back and forth that you can do. So I really am a big fan of that too. I think, other than lack of results, which are obviously, of course you have to get results. Doesn't matter what kind of marketing you do, you're going to have to get results with client. Not getting results, I get. If somebody's pissed off with you because you're not, they're however long in and it's not working, get it. Communication issues, vanity metrics, all of those I get. Lack of results is an interesting one. We have a client right now that we're really struggling to get results for. They've been with us for a while. The site is a dog's dinner, but it's just a difficult one. It's a really difficult one to rank. I think one of the most important things there, again, is communication. I've been on calls with that client / partner a lot throughout the last couple of months, trying to work on this project. And obviously we're over delivering to try and make it work. But the reality is sometimes you're going to find it really hard to deliver results, even if you're really good at what you do. And what you do then is kind of what shows your character. Right? If you can hide and not communicate and try to, not like, oh no, you can't book a call with me, I'm busy. Or you can just pick up the phone and be like, hey dude, look, this is, it's bad news. Like nothing's moving, but here are all the things that we're planning to do right now. And then you actually have to do them.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, just that kind of that pure candor, if you will, and getting in front of it. I mean, we had a Google Ads client who they were in a situation where I was like, man, this might work, this might not work. Like we won't know until we try it. But I was like, here are some issues. Their offer just wasn't very good. and they didn't have any sort of like lead magnet, which for their industry they really needed. But anyway, so we started running ads for them. 3 weeks in, I'm looking at the account. I'm like, nothing's moving. Like, they're not really getting that many clicks. There's not that many searches in the area that they want to target. And when they are getting clicks, they haven't gotten a single conversion yet. So send them over an email. I'm like, hey, we need to jump on a call. So jumps on a call. I'm like, listen, right now what we're doing, it is not working. I don't think it's going to work if we continue to do this. Here's what I suggest that we do to try to see if this can work, if this can be viable, which is essentially like, let's increase the radius to target a little bit more people, see if we can get a little bit more volume from it. I was going to make a different tweak on the account as well, and we'll see what kind of happens. A month passes, still not much change. So I basically sent an email like, hey, listen, been a pleasure working with you, but this isn't working. I don't think it's going to work doing what you're doing now. So I don't think it's worth your time and money to pay me or to run these ads, because it's not going to work. And from there, like, that's, it can be scary to be like, hey, like, you paid me, thanks, but it's not working. Thanks for your money, sort of situations. But he was, at least through email, he was very appreciative of just like, hey, thank you for getting on a call with me, for explaining that, here are the issues and what's not working. Thank you for being honest and, not having me, continue to pay for these ads for, 2, 3, 4 months until I decide that it's not working and I fire you myself. And just those sorts of things. Like, I even just had a sales call recently where, they probably had a budget of like here. And I was like, great, well, in your market, you need to have a budget up here if you want to see any sort of results. And I was like, listen, like, that's just the honest, brutal truth. I mean, if you don't have the budget, then I wouldn't recommend going forward, because you're just going to get screwed over. But I mean, if you do think, great, let's talk. And that was like the one thing, like, I can tell they're totally unsure about what they want, if it's a good move for them. But they're like, man, like, honestly, like, just thank you for being honest about the situation that we're in, and in your candor and all that kind of stuff. So just getting out in front of things, that's something I mentioned while you were gone, is that it's a big difference if you get out in front of something than if you let something happen and then you address it, because then, regardless of the situation, regardless of the reality, it just looks like you're covering your own ass at that point.
Yup. 100%. I think it's such an interesting topic, this topic of trying to keep clients happy versus making money as a business versus retention and all of that. And I think that one of the things that's been very interesting is if we actually look at it from a totally different point of view, which is the point of view of like a service provider that does productized services. I mean, my brand, SEO Butler, has pretty much grown organically thanks to customer service and communication and really good product, and it's a profitable business. And when I look at the Facebook groups especially, and I look at the complaints that people have, it is almost entirely based on communication and customer service when people are pissed off about other vendors. So like when you look at, people complaining about whoever it might be, it could, whatever, then it's like, oh, they never got back to my ticket. Oh, they wouldn't refund me after they delivered an absolute piece of crap. Oh, whatever. And I think that, one of the things that's been really interesting into training our customer service team was to try and teach them empathy. And that was really difficult for me as well, because, when you quantify something just with numbers, then you can always argue that, well, wait a minute, that guy ordered a 500-word article and we delivered a 500-word article and he can, shut the F up, like, go away. You're not getting a refund. Yeah. But once you start deploying empathy and you start actually asking the right questions, you might find out that, well, actually, the reason why he's asking for a refund is not because he actually hated the article, but it actually turns out that his client canceled. He no longer needs the article. He doesn't have the money to cover it. The client hadn't paid him yet. And so for the sake of a $30 article, you go, well, you know what? I can give you either account credit or full refund. Now, at that point, you're making the distinction between the guy that you have made $30 off of that will never shop with you again, or the guy that you've refunded $30 and you made a small loss because you already paid the writer, but that now becomes a lifetime customer was $10,000 spent, right? And I kind of feel that the exact same applies with client anything, is if you're willing to understand the value in a client relationship and you're willing to apply yourself and be fair. I'm not saying, let people take the piss and ruin you financially, but if you really balance it and you provide a great service, you deploy empathy where you need to and when you need to, and you get out in front of problems when you need to, then you can run a super profitable business, be satisfied in what you do and all of that. But I think that the problem is still that a lot of people believe that what we do as entrepreneurs is like an easy way to make money, and that you can just you can just take that $300 package and then charge $2,000 and then get away with it. And if they don't renew, well, you've made $1,700. Fuck them, right?
Yeah, I mean it's one of the sad realities of our industry, and I think that for 99% of people, we're just kind of preaching to the choir because they don't necessarily care about doing things in a way that makes logical sense, where there's no real incentive to do things well and to do things right in our industry, because like we talked about and you alluded to as we talked about beforehand, you can sell somebody on a $3,000 package, you pay somebody $100 a month to do it. 6 months from now, because you told them it'll take 6 months to get results, and because they thought, okay, great, I'll see nothing for 6 months, then all of a sudden, after the 6 months, everything would just shoot up magically. Okay, 6 months have passed, you've made, what was that, 3,000, so 2,900. I'm not going to do 29 times 6, but whatever that number is, a good amount of money, just under about $18,000, is that, okay, great, you've made yourself 18 grand over the course of 6 months. So you had 6 months to replace that client with somebody else. And so if you can generate, one client every 3 months, you're basically in a Hydra situation. Okay, great, you burnt one client, but now you have 2 more that you can just make 18 grand off of and burn and switch that out. And there's a lot of people that kind of use that model.
It is a sad reality. It really is. Although the one thing that I will disagree with is you said that there's no real incentive. And I think that on the surface there isn't. But I think that from a couple of positions there is, which is quality of life. So your overall satisfaction of what you do and how you do it, that has to play a role. Now, of course, a lot of those people that are scamming people, and let's just call it what it is, they are scamming people, they are totally convinced that what they're doing is right. So obviously, that's difficult to account for. But I also believe that you're not really going to level up professionally or personally if that's what you're doing, because the amount of business I get from referrals, the amount of introductions, great introductions that I get just from my network, and this isn't a network where I've gone out and added people on LinkedIn, I'm talking about natural organic network, is invaluable. And I don't think that you get that by scamming people and by changing your industry every 6 months and, going from being a YouTube guy to being a Facebook guy to being an SEO guy and then, releasing a book. But let's try and bring this back on track. Keeping clients happy versus getting results versus staying profitable. Do you think that doing all those 3 things is actually possible?
I do. So first thing there is being profitable. That's something, if you want to be in business for any sort of time, you're just going to have to do, because you're not going to, unless you're Amazon, you can lose $20 billion a year because you have a limited number of investors. That's, it's not very viable in our industry. So being profitable, that's something that I would say, out of everything that we've talked about, that's the first thing you're going to have to figure out, because you're just not going to be in business if you can't get that sorted. And then on top of that, yeah, keeping clients happy. I think that's just a matter of refining your customer service kind of experience, if you will. Even if you're a super productized service, there's still going to be times where you need to go outside of kind of your lane if you want to do that. And what that also ties back into is that if clients are happier, you'll retain them for longer, which means your profit will increase as well. So yes, it's also a matter of looking at the long term. So yes, maybe like I mentioned earlier, like we did about like 2.5 months of work for a client because what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to slow down the pace that we said that we'd be able to meet. We also didn't want to come to them that earlier in the relationship and be like, hey, they're not a small client. Be like, hey, give me more money. Thanks for, I'm sure you're happy with hiring me now. And so that was basically a calculated decision on our part where, yes, could they cancel, regardless of what kind of legal contract we have in place, because that's a whole other story with how with how contract law works. But even if we had some sort of agreement where if they like cancel in a month from now, yes, we would have lost money essentially on them, or like not made nearly as much as we would expected. But it was a calculated decision because we do this, we'll get the results that we expected around the time that we expected them, and then we'll be able to retain them. We can make this up on the back end. So it's looking more of like, okay, great, we make this decision now, we do this now. This will help us, later on. I'm a big fan of, traveling out to clients when I have the time to, and when I can, and we're not locked down inside. So, that's something that is expensive. I mean, plane tickets in the US are stupidly expensive. Like if I were to go from here to let's say somewhere like Michigan where I have a client, that might be, it's not too bad, but it's like maybe like a 2-3 hour flight, maybe like a 4-hour flight. It's going to cost me probably like $200. Then if I'm there for, let's say, 2 days, it might cost me like $150 to $200 a night in a hotel. Then I'll probably like take them out to dinner and so on and so forth. So that might be like a $500 to $750 expense, and the time that it takes for me of probably doing no work for like a day or two and planning all that and all that kind of stuff for probably no immediate gain, to be able to make that up on the back end of when they're thinking about like our relationship, and they're going, man, nobody else that we work with for any other contractor or service provider that we work with has ever flown out to say hi to me. Nobody else, has done this, et cetera. Nobody else spends this much time, is willing to walk me through this. Then it makes up for it in the back end.
I think that you're right. I think that it is. I think it is absolutely possible. I agree that being profitable is the first thing that you need to figure out. Getting results is the other first thing that you need to figure out. If you're not confident in your services and you're not asking for enough money for them, then you might as well not start. I think that the keeping clients happy part is mostly about comms. And then it is about the cherries on top that you provide, and I'm not saying that, if you're a freelancer that's just started, you don't need to be flying to places and visiting people. The reason why Jarod and I are able to do that is because we're dealing with, sizable retainers that are bringing in, sizable amounts of money. But obviously when we first started, we didn't overextend and do all of that. But, ultimately, I think that that's really it. Getting results, you have to be confident in your stuff, staying profitable. Well, if you're not, then you need to rework your entire business model. And keeping clients happy, we've agreed, is 99% about communication, and that communication takes on different shapes and forms, from educating people before the deal happens, all the way to getting out in front of bad things when they do happen, and just being honest and communicating. So yeah, I think it's very doable. And it's, no one said that it's easy. It's work, right? It's kind of what you have to do.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And, even I'm sure you're in the same position where even to this day, we're still changing how we communicate, how we set expectations. And it's constant because everybody has different requirements. And there's always things that, man, maybe the 10 clients that we had a year and a half ago when this issue came up, the way that we explained this, they all got it, they all understood it. These 4 new clients, when we explain the same way, they're just not getting it. Now we have to change our approach to how we're approaching this situation or whatever it may be. But something that's really helped me that, I'm sure all this is sounds overwhelming when you're thinking about like all the little things that can come up. Is just taking a once and done approach, for lack of a better phrase, which is when anytime we come into a situation that we want to never come into again, which is anytime a client has a question or has a problem or an issue arises, we figure out a solution and implement it ahead of time to solve it. So like when I say that we do things like we send over essentially like client training or like email sequences that arose because we kept getting these similar questions. And then we were like, okay, well, people tend to have issues with the first couple of weeks. They're expecting that once you turn your ads on, they'll run today the same way that they would run if you're running for years from now. So you need to set that expectation of what you'll see initially. But while we're doing that, since we're going to like send a what to expect email, what are the couple other things that we tend to run into? Or what are the things that we don't run into, but we wish that clients understood that they asked, and let's just send that as an email sequence. So it's just running into that issue, then thinking out how can we solve that in a scalable manner, and not every solution is going to be super scalable, but something like that, super easy. When I send over a deliverable, automatically attach a PDF of here's how to read it, or a pre-recorded video from a year ago of here's how to read it. So those things like that, that's totally scalable. It makes a big difference, and it's not something that we would have created just like out of thin air. It's just because an issue arose and this was the solution that we found, and then we were able to solve it so that it doesn't come up again.
I love that. Yeah, I think I need to do more of that myself. Makes a lot of sense. That's how we do canned replies on SEO Butler. Is if a question gets asked more than once, then we turn it into a canned reply.
Oh, I may have lost you again. Oh, that's unfortunate. Jonathan may have just disappeared again. Well, I guess Jonathan is 0 for 2 for today. Well, yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything that we wanted to cover. There might have been a couple more things we talked about, but Jonathan has disappeared once again. So I guess we will we'll call it a day on that one, and we can talk about everything else on a different day. Hopefully the stream will actually stop, because Jonathan controls that, and I don't know if he's going to be able to stop the stream, or we're just going to see nothing for a bit. But for everyone that watched, thank you for sticking with us and with Jonathan's lack of internet abilities. And if you want to stay in touch, if you go to jarodspiewak.com/show, it's a very simple email capture. There's no offer or anything on the back end. It's just that every time one of these episodes gets uploaded to my YouTube channel, when the recording's live, even if you don't catch it live, you'll be able to see the recording. So if you want to sign up for that, awesome. And hope to see you on future recordings. Thanks.